What's going on, guys? Welcome to the latest episode of Can I Kick It, your number one podcast for all Black history. And of course, today is a very special podcast because not only do I have the other half of the Henny Derby, we're going to be talking about the Henny Derby. From why is it important, how did it get started, and more so on. So, with that being said, I want to introduce my co-host for the night, Mr. Kyle Carr, the dad of two.
Yes, the new father of two, loving that life. It's good to be on here, and this is kind of our way of saying, here's everything you need to know about the Henny Derby, so you don't ask us a million questions throughout the week. Everything you need to know is going to be on this episode.
Right. So normally the style of Can I Kick It, we normally like to have like evergreen episodes so that you can go back and listen to whenever, This episode is going to kind of be like that, but a mixture of like up-to-date stuff. So you might get a little preview of both teams in this as well. But with that being said, let's go ahead and start off. The question that everyone wants to know, why and how did the Henny Derby get started?
How is pretty simple. The how kind of just goes with way back in 2019, the first season of USL League One and first season of Forward Madison. It was just Yogi reaching out and sending a message on Twitter asking if we wanted to put a bet on this match. And it was very simple, and we bet a bottle of Hennessy. Pretty straightforward, pretty easy bet, no big deal. Richmond won. I had to ship a bottle of Hennessy to Yogi. That was frustrating and difficult. Fast forward 2 weeks later, Forward Madison plays Richmond again. Forward Madison wins that one. And because of the headaches of trying to ship a bottle of liquor cross country, Ellie just sent me the money and said, here you go. So then it got to the penultimate match. And that was kind of how the Henny Derby, I don't want to say necessarily got its fame and kind of broke out into the specter, but it's definitely what catapulted it into more of just this is kind of like a fun little thing between, two supporters, and became more of this is a notable event that you have to pay attention to, a notable event that you maybe should be aware of what's going on and how big it became after it.
Yeah. And the funny thing in that about like you shipping me the bottle of Hennessy was by the time I got it, 2 games have already been paid. So I didn't even get to enjoy it in the midst of a victory. But yeah, like Kyle said, like I pretty much just reached out to you because back in 2019, for those who don't know, Forward Madison was the media darling for all intents and purposes. Like y'all was doing lower league soccer stuff that people didn't really, pay much attention to. And Richmond was kind of, they've gotten a lot better with their media presence, but back in 2019, like the media presence was there. And we were on a 7-game losing streak. And I think we were playing Madison. I was just like, I just reached out to you and I was like, all right, let's just bet something on this. Like if Richmond wins, great. If Richmond doesn't, all right. And till this day, like I have said, Daniel Jackson can name my firstborn child because he scored that goal. He can name my firstborn child. He has that right because he scored that goal. And that's not even the crazy thing about that game. Like Joey G had one where he ran from like coast to coast. It was about to score it. Like, oh man. And every Henny Derby game ends 1-0. So it's not like it's fun level excitement. You're on the edge of your seat, like biting your fingernails.
Yeah, and I think it's also like both these teams did not have great 2019s. Madison did make the playoffs, but that was by the skin of their teeth, thanks, and more in part because Chattanooga completely collapsed. And Madison was content on going Jose ball, Conte ball. We're going to have a 1-0 lead, and we're okay with that. We're not going to try and get 2 or 3. We're good with the 1-0 lead. So like the first year, it was definitely these are two teams who they're not playing their best ball because Madison was also struggling. They had been on a slight losing streak at the beginning of the season and they turned it around in June, but there were still the same problems in July. So when it got to these type of matches, it's like these are two teams who are evenly matched, and you saw that in all 3 matchups. It could have gone either. All 3 matches could have gone either way. If the ball bounces one way or the other, if a pass gets through the back line if the goalie doesn't make a save. So it wasn't just that these were games that, it was fun. They were also intense and easily could have gone. They were evenly matched. And I think that was kind of the big thing as well. Like, this wasn't just one team curb stomping the other. It was an even matchup.
No, most definitely. And honestly, I think the way I had those first two matches, we'll talk about the third one, because the third one is its own separate entity in itself. I think those first two matches really set up what happened in the third match about, like, both were tight, both were 1-1 affairs. And it just seemed as if, like, both were played in Madison. So it's not like we even have one in Richmond yet. And it was just like, okay. Richmond, by that point, we knew, like, all right, unless we go on a crazy winning streak, we're not getting in the playoffs. And we actually ended the year as the worst independent team that year. Trust me, 2019 was horrible for me because that was not only my first year podcasting. Doing a podcast after that kind of season, after every game, rough. But I think the third game, like you said, it was so different and so unique in the aspect of it was like unlike anything you ever see. And I tell people all the time, it's like no Henny Derby is going to match that one. Like no other Henny Derby is going to match that one. That was pre-COVID, so things were different.
The only way it could ever get to that level is if it is for the title. If it is the final in the USL League. If it's a USL League One final, that's the only way it could probably get to that type of energy and level, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's the only way. So I was going to hop into it about this third one. So this happened to be in Richmond. So not only on this night, it was also Heritage Night here in Richmond. Also combined with the fact that you guys decided to do a road tour during that match. So let's start off with this road tour that happened for y'all.
Yeah, I call it a glorified beer run across the country because that's more or less what it was. Turbo had talked to some of the supporters in North Carolina. North Carolina supporters asked, when are you going to bring us beers? It was something like, when are you going to bring us beer? And I think Turbo said, like, well, we have a match in Richmond on this date. Like, we could do it at that point if you want to go ahead and grab it then. I don't know. It was something like that. So then from that idea, it became this, well, let's just go and bring all of this beer, all this basically Spotted Cow. Let's just bring all of that to different spots. And a lot of it was tied back to Peter Wilt, especially because Peter Wilt was still the technical director of the team at the time. So we go to Chicago Red Stars, first stop, a team Peter Wilt helps form. Go there, meet the front office, deliver them beer. We go over to Indianapolis, Indy 11, another team Peter will create. Talk to their supporter group, talk to some of their front office, meet up with them. Then we got to Columbus, Ohio. That was just kind of like it's on the way. It's kind of one of those, who's on the way of a notable, team supporter group that we should see. So that was kind of where that happened. Got over to Asheville, North Carolina, meet with South Slope Blues. I also think it was kind of like a business kind of thing for the club as well, making those connections. And then as we passed through, there's a place in West Virginia called Mingo County. And this is why I call it a glorified beer run, because this had nothing to do with soccer. This is just because it had Mingo in the name. Got to meet Hootie, the town mayor, OG, great man, gave us a bottle of moonshine.
Oh no, wait. I did hear this part. You met a guy named Hootie? He's the town mayor?
Yep. He was mayor of wherever we were in Mingo County, West Virginia. And the first thing he says when we get to the city hall, which is kind of like the small little thing, he immediately goes, "Y'all must be the Mingos." That was the first thing he said to us. So Hootie, loved the man, gave us a bottle of moonshine. I don't even know. They brought like someone that I think he was just like some Jill Schmo off the street who just so happened to coach like a youth soccer team. They brought him in to meet us. Again, glorified beer run. So that was where we went in between Columbus before we got to Asheville as well. And then we were supposed to stop in Raleigh. Didn't make that trip because we ran out of time. So we went straight to Richmond. And that's when we met up with North Carolina supporters. And that's when we met up with you guys down in Richmond for the match and had the tailgate. And FTC came up and Pablo Mauer was there. Just like it was all these people were there. So by the time we got there, the party was ready.
Yeah, it was. So the other part of it that really made a nice super duper huge was I was working with the kickers on doing the heritage night. Now, up to this point before, there's never been a night dedicated to the black community in soccer. One that I'm aware of, you know. So I was just like, oh, well, let me see if I can do one. Obviously enough, it worked. So pretty much that whole night we were just working with like black communities and organizations, things like that. Like I think I was texting you and I was just like, dude, I'm running promotion sales on this event all by myself. Like, I had to sell tickets. I had to yeah. That's why I said like I'm good at ever getting in sales again. It counts that amount of money. I was like, I'm good. I don't need to do this ever again in my life. But the actual like night of itself, and I remember it. Taylor Rockwell of Total Soccer Derby, may he rest in peace, hit me up the day before the Henny Derby. It was like, hey man, like what are you doing tomorrow? And I was like, oh, I'm gonna be at the game. Because honestly, I didn't expect that many people to come. Like I knew you guys were coming down, but I was expecting it to be like a typical Richmond game, like just two supporters. That's it. I wasn't expecting a whole bunch. But man, it was almost like, and I've never been to an MLS All Star event, but the names that were there, it felt like MLS All Star.
It felt like a like if there was a USL All Star game, that would have been the USL All Star. That would have been a USL All Star roster at the time. That would have been there.
Yeah, like that because we had Total Soccer Show guys. We had Jason Day, Pablo Mara, Sneeze. We had. I think even the Cooligans were watching the game live somewhere. Like
I think they were aware of it. I think they watched it. Yeah, and there were people that were watching it too. It's not even just the people out there. It's like the people that were also watching it because, and you'll probably touch on this, the trophy. I think that tweet with the trophy really made it go even further.
Yeah, it did. Because so the trophy itself, and I'm pretty sure this is the interesting part that a lot of people aren't aware of. The trophy itself is the old Henny bottle. I got the bottle from a friend of mine, Jordan. He's a Henny connoisseur. Like this man has drank and tasted every type of thing. If you know it, he done tried it. He's also made like his own Henny moonshine, which is diabolical by the sense of it. And he's the
I am intrigued.
Yeah, and he is the reason why I have drank Henny and Red Bull before. So he's the culprit. So it was one of his old Henny bottles, and my wife, co-worker, is like an art designer. So she designed the trophy and the base and everything there. So we get I haven't had the trophy in my actual hand until that night of the game, and I think within 20 minutes, the trophy base was already off. The face was off. Like we were just literally just holding the bottle by the end of the night.
You had to hold the bottle, you had to hold the bottle and the base at the same time. You couldn't just hold one because the base would have fallen off.
It was all over the place. But in the game, I don't remember what actually happened on the field. Because I remember you guys scored early, and then after that, it was we kind of just whatever happened. But in the stands itself, it is not too many times in USL that you have two supporter groups in the same stadium with each other. You might have 3 or 4 fans and then another supporters group. But it's not like you have a full supporter section of another team and a full support section of another team. And it got to a point, man, I think around the 50th or 60th minute, I don't think people were paying attention to what was on the field. It was people were just paying attention to what was happening in the stands because it's y'all would go, we would go. Y'all would go, we would go. And it was just this electrifying energy that was happening in the stands.
Yeah, as I didn't watch any of that match because I was capoing, which is a weird experience in itself. It's normally when you go to a road, if you're going on the road match, you're probably going with the assumption you're going to watch. You're not thinking you're going to capo. But I was doing that, and yeah, it was kind of that. It was necessarily we're going to out-sing, out-chant you in your own stadium. That was kind of the feeling and emotion. It was the match, Ford Madsen already has the lead, so we just need to keep doing what we're doing and hope that they can hold out for a win. But at the same time, we want to come into the stadium and we want to out chant and out sing you. And especially when you have another supporter group that's not going to let that happen, I think that really is what made it even more special. Because if it would have been one thing if it was Ford Madison coming into, say, Chattanooga and out chanting them and out singing them clear as day, and that'd be one thing. But it was like we would do it, and then you guys would turn around and be like, no, that's not happening. And then you would do a chance to drown us out and be picked. Because if you listen to the broadcast, it you can tell like it trades in and out who's louder.
Yeah.
It's not just one group.
Yeah, most definitely. It got crazy super loud. So backtrack real quick to the tailgate. Like the tailgate itself was the stuff of legend. So for those who've never been to a Richmond Pickers game, the River City Red Army, who's the supporters group, tailgate spot is literally on the corner of the stadium. Like there's a little like dugout, like camping ground. And man, I remember I'll never forget that. Like I walked in and it was just packed. Like I've never seen it that packed where you you guys had Richmond supporters group, Fort Madison, and then you had like North Carolina FC because they came from Turbo, like right in the middle. And it was like a weird 30 minutes. So everyone was like, I don't know if I would have mixed with them yet.
And then the drink started flowing.
And the drink started flowing. And then this watermelon that had, oh my God, it had everything mixed into it.
And soaked for days.
Yeah, soaked for days. So it was literally, it was one of the renegados. He came up to us and he was like, hey, I got a watermelon that's been soaked in my house for 7 days, he said, in alcohol. And we were like, what? Like, why do you? He was like, you guys want some? And we were just like, all right, whatever. So he brings out this watermelon, and it's not even, it's like a regular sized watermelon, but it's just dripping, like just dripping lit alcohol. And we're like, bro, what? Like, what is this? He cut it open, and as soon as he cut it open, you just got hit with like moonshine and bourbon and like
tequila.
Only thing you needed was one bite. I don't know if you have found Grego yet.
At that point, well, and the thing was, Fort Madison brought a couple kegs of beer as well. So you had this watermelon that Renegados brought. You have Fort Madison bringing kegs. You still had Hennessy from various people. Like various people had a bottle of Hennessy as well. So it was just like once you had all of these concoctions and mixtures happening, yeah, after that first 30 minutes, everyone was having a good time. And I think that was kind of the big thing. It's like everyone was still like cool and everyone's chill and everyone's having a good time. Like no one is being an asshole. And I think that's what made it good is like, okay, we can all hang out, have some drinks, have a good time without being dicks.
Yeah. And it was like you said, it was a super cool time. And by the end of the night, man, you had Grego being Dog King and showcasing y'all the trophy. I was just like, where's the trophy? And Greg's over here presenting. I'm like, Greg, look what are you doing?
Well, the thing was, I had talked to Bulow, may he rest in peace. I talked to him. All of a sudden, I'm just seeing like Chris and April and Grego standing. I was like, what's going on? And then all of a sudden, he's like presenting the trophy. I was like, oh, okay.
Man, Bulow was one person, and I love Bulow. He embraced it so much. Not only was one because it was supporter group driven, like it wasn't like the Barnes and Crows Cup or anything from the league, like how y'all was supposed to be quote unquote rivals at that time with Loudon. I mean, not Loudon.
Lansing, yeah.
Or like South Georgia was supposed to be rivals with, Greenville. So it was like 100% supporter. But the biggest thing was that it was black people driving, And Beulah at the time, I think he was the only American-born black coach. So he embraced it on a whole nother level, man.
Yeah, I think the coaches and players, because I know like on Ford Madison side, like Don Smart was getting into it, Brian Silvestre, he was getting into it, Oliver White, like Sean Russell, like all of these black players on Ford Madison were also like, oh, okay, this is cool. We want, like, I don't want to say it gave them extra motivation, but it was kind of like this is something cool. This is something I wouldn't have expected. And they embraced it. Like just seeing the black players on Ford Madison embracing it as well. Like when we brought over the trophy after the match, they were just like celebrating and dancing with it. Like they had thought, like they treated it like they had won the cup as well.
Yeah. And like the Richmond players walking off, man, I remember it. Like they were just so devastated, because it was just like that's because they knew how the season was going, and they knew like this game was big,
Mm-hmm.
and they wanted to have that victory there. And I think the other thing about it too is it's weird to say, like even at our own stadium, we were kind of looked at as the underdogs. We were looked at as like, if Richmond wins it, it's a feel-good story. Or it matters is expected to win it. You know?
Yeah, at that point, because this was right near like the end of the season, so both teams are pushing for the playoffs because they're at that point. North Texas was running with the league. Greenville and Lansing were pretty safe and 2 or 3, so there was only one playoff spot, and between Tormenta, Richmond, Ford Madison, Tucson, even at that point, and Chattanooga, it was like all these teams are within 4 or 5 points. So a win gets you right back into it. A loss takes you out. So, the implications as well for playoffs were huge for that match as well.
Yeah, most definitely. So that's the end of that Henny Derby. So now, like, I want to ask you this: like, why is the Henny Derby so important to the Black culture? I mean, we know why, but to the listeners, why is it so important?
I think there's 2 or 3 reasons why, in my opinion. One, it is still purely Black owned and embraced and created. Like, this was not, something that, white people created that Black people kind of latched onto and took it. It's not, and it still hasn't been, Black people have created it and it hasn't been taken by white people and kind of culturally appropriated either. You still have those aspects, I think, in terms of the tailgate showing how much Black supporters were present. I think kind of gave that signal as well because, and this is USL League One. Like, this is 3rd division. This is not, MLS level. So like, these are just some 3rd division teams that are doing this. And the fact that you had all these Black supporters going to this event, and now you have Black supporters kind of saying like, I need to do this. And I think it's just something that every Black person can relate to. You're at like the tailgate was pretty much, as you say, at HBCU homecoming. I say like it's a holiday cookout. Everyone's there. Everyone's just meeting up. You haven't seen these people in, months or years. You all meet up and it's like you go right back to, it's like a good time everyone's having. So I think that really is why it's been so embraced, is because it is Black created. It's still Black owned. It still has, hasn't been fully culturally appropriated. It's not like USL League One is over here selling merch for the Henny Derby. It's not. So they haven't sold merch yet. We're safe yet. We still have time to make sure that doesn't happen. But you know what I mean? It's like, it's not like, an MLS rivalry where it's like all of a sudden it doesn't become about the supporters. It becomes about the network. Yeah. And because I was going to say, like, a lot of like, even in LA, even though those two have a natural rivalry, it's still pushed as a league rivalry. It's still pushed as the team. It's not about the supporters. Yeah. While the Henny Derby is still about the supporters. It's still about Black supporters.
I think most definitely. I think it's a safe space for Black people. It's a safe space for Black voices. Like if you want to tell someone, like, if someone came up to you actually like, yo, what's a good game to watch in USL? You're not going to tell them, oh, watch Union and Greenville, because that's more like tactics. I think if you want to show them a game that's just about like as we love to say on Walking 90, like this game is just for vibes. I think that's what the Henny Derby is. It's for the culture, pun intended. But it's a game that's for us. Like, we are the forefront. And in the sport and where Black voices are just starting to pop up, with the Shea Butter FCs and the Diaspora Uniteds and the Banter Pubs and the Florida Cultures and things like that. I think a game like this is important because unless you're in Africa, you're not seeing a game where Black supporters are like so visibly seen enough. It's usually white faces. It's usually white voices. You're hearing their stories. You're hearing their interpretation of the game. And in this game, you hear how we feel about it, how we've made the game kind of like our own thing,
Yeah, and I think with the safe space, even though Madison is still very white, and I mean, even like Ford Madison supporters, it's still heavily white. When you think of the Henny Derby, you don't think of that. You think of, the Black supporter group that is involved with it. And I think that's kind of the big thing as well, especially with U.S. soccer in general. it's not really a safe space for Black people. You know, there still hasn't been that space. You know, there are more Black supporter groups coming up because, you know, there was just Black Fires. But now there's you. Now there's Featherstone. Now we have over in New Mexico with Black Diamonds. You know, other Black supporters are popping up. You know, obviously Atlanta being Atlanta, but you see it's growing to the point that now there's more of a Black presence within the American soccer scene that wasn't there even 3-4 years ago.
Yeah, that's very true. And I also think it's important to keep in mind of how this story is being written and how it's being told. Because a lot of people look at the Henny Derby and just say, like, oh, it's just a big party. Oh, it's just, you know, they're just having fun. But it's so much more that's happening outside of that. And you know, we're both doing in our both respective communities. Because like Richmond, if you didn't know, surprise, surprise, Richmond is the former home of the Confederacy. And how much has the Richmond community, you know, for better or worse, tried to put that history behind us. I think in the soccer landscape of things, like what happened in 2019 and 2020, especially with the pandemic, is we've definitely tried in our supporters group to make the supporter section more available to those. To not only Black voices, but to the LGBT community, to those in binary spaces, things like that. And just knowing that, you know, there is a derby that kind of embraces all of that. You know, I would say this, like, it's the prime example of saying, like, Black history exists 365 is what the Henny Derby is, you know, almost in soccer terms.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of one of those where it's always going to be at the forefront of when Black supporters talk about what Black soccer culture is in America. Because, you know, there's obviously highlighting specific Black players, but now you can, you know, highlight specific Black supporters, and you can highlight this specific derby as this is, like, when you think of Black soccer culture, this derby is going to be, you know, one of the first things you talk about.
Yeah. So 2020, we had the whole pandemic, and it shut everything down. Because I remember our first game of the year.
Your home opener was Ford Madison.
Yeah. No, I was saying, when the year first started, I think our first home game was supposed to be, if memory serves me right, I think it was supposed to be Greenville.
Oh, you mean like the actual, the revised schedule.
Okay. And then it got switched to Ford Madison. So, and I think Richmond just got approved to have fans in the stadium. So we're like, oh, our home opener is against Ford? And we were just like, oh my God, like, yo, this is insane. And we're just coming off a loss against Greenville. So we're like, okay, all right, how is this going to go? And I'll never forget it. Emmy scored in the 10th minute, and everyone else was chanting. I don't know if you can see me in the broadcast. I'm just biting my fingernails the entire time. Like, when is this going to go south? Please don't go south. Like,
it's
how was
funny
it for you in Madison?
It was because Chris, April, and I were watching it, and it was one of those where, like, okay, you allowed the early goal, and it was frustrating. And at least it was an early enough goal that you can play your way back into it for a draw. That was always the hope. Okay, get a goal, get back into it. It's fine. But it's kind of funny looking back because that game pretty much encompassed Ford Madison's entire 2020 season, where there was no creativity. There was little offensive ideas. And once you got to about the 60th minute and you still haven't scored, I kind of relegated myself to thinking they're not going to score. After the 60th minute, it was kind of one of those, like, they're not going to score at this point unless a botched set piece happens and it kind of just stumbles into the net. Ford Madison wasn't going to create a goal. It was kind of weird because that is pretty much Ford Madison's 2020 season in a nutshell. But it was tense because as much as I wanted to think, okay, all you need to do is draw. So then if I would have kept the trophy if they had drew. So I'm just thinking, just get a goal, get a draw, and get the hell out. Whatever. It's fine. I can live with, I'm not happy with the draw, but I can at least keep the trophy for the year. And this was the only time these two played. So it's not even like you get another chance to make up for it. This was your one chance, and you didn't take advantage of it. So it was just frustrating because it was pretty much they couldn't do anything offensively. They allow a goal that you can argue they should have done better defending. And then you lose, and it's like, and this was after they had lost to North Texas at the beginning. This was after a boring draw against Greenville the week before. So you're already starting off slow, and then you lose this game. Now your first 3 games, you have no wins and a draw.
Yeah. The range of emotions I went to that game, I don't think I've ever had that since.
And it was like I was at such a high. And all the bullshit that happened going into the week too. That was also like the thing. Like going into that week, all of the bullshit that happened with the club and their Henny Derby pack. It was just like I was getting to the point where I was like, I just want this week to be over. And then they lose, and I was like, now I'm annoyed that with the week that I had, and then to lose, it just felt like, yeah, this was always going. I should have like. It's kind of like this was always going to happen with the week that happened. And then losing, it kind of felt deserved at times as well. So that was also the frustrating part. Like during the day, I was okay, but as the week and then like at the end of the match, I was very frustrated.
I mean, like, look, going to talk about it. For those who remember, like the Henny Derby pack that Ford Madison did, and at first, I'm not gonna lie. Like at first, when I saw it, I didn't even think about anything like that seriously. I was just like, oh, pay me my money. Like, it's good. Like it's a joke. And next thing I know is like it just took off. But I will say this about it. Fort Madison, they did a good job of like recognizing what they did wrong. They knew they messed up. They knew they did.
Yeah.
They did a good job of recognizing that and saying like we're not trying to profit off of Black creators, nothing like that. We were just trying to be a part of it. And we explained to them, like, this ain't how you do it.
Right. It was one of those, and I always say, it's not necessarily the pack itself and the idea itself that was the problem. It was how fast everything moved from the idea being brought up to me in the first place and then it going out into the web on sale. Like, that was always the part for me that was always the most frustrating. It was like that was the aspect of it. It was just like how fast it moved, and before I even have a chance to really throw input, it was already out there. And then that plus, obviously when it blew up and people are saying, okay, how did they not consult the founder of the Henny Derby? It's like, well, okay, I didn't know, but there are definitely some people and definitely some things that were said where people are like, okay, they didn't consult the founder of the Henny Derby. It's like, well, then I still was aware. I am still a co-founder. Like I did know about it, but how it all happened, like I say, it was just like the speed of which it moved. That is what I think that was the biggest frustration, and why it went south the way it did was because of how fast everything went.
Yeah, and as I tell people all the time, like, I'm not the founder of the Henny Derby. Like I co-founded this with someone else. Like,
yeah,
it's two black guys. But I think that another reason why the Henny Derby blew up the way how it did is especially everything that happened with the murder of George Floyd and everything that was happening that way around you, especially. I think that's another reason why so many people latched on to the Henny Derby because it was, I wouldn't want to say it's an escape from the world, but it was almost like this little piece of black positivity that grew up out of like negativity that was happening.
Yeah, it was one of the things that you looked forward. Like it was one of the things that I looked forward to. You looked forward to it, especially considering the pandemic was happening, and then you have the murder of George Floyd, and then all the protests that happened. And while it was good to see, people taking that next step and trying to do better, and I mean, this was also before the fatigue of people saying, "Oh, what can I do to do better?" And then you have to answer for every black person, like, "Okay, here's the shit you need to do. Here's all your resources. Figure it out." It was before we hit that stage. So it was just more people are still learning, people are still trying, which was good. And then you had this one positive thing that was going to happen as well to at least look forward to. And because of all the memories from the previous Henny Derby, it kind of at least put you in good spirits and made you excited for it.
Yeah, true. So here we come now. We're more or less a week out for the Henny Derby. People that are listening to this afterwards are going to be like, I thought the Henny Derby already happened. um, but here we are a week out from the Henny Derby. So what are you expecting from it?
It's going to be interesting because I feel like even though Richmond brought back a lot of the same players that they did last year, it feels as though they're still trying to find their identity again. That it feels as because it feels like they're still a talented team. It's clear that they're going to try and counterattack you. You know, they still have Terzaghi, you still have Bolanos, you still have, you know, a defense. And with the addition of Jalen Chrysler, like the defense is still there. So it's kind of like, even though the same like core is there, we don't know what to fully expect from Richmond. And on the other side with Madison, this team will not die. This team, I keep joking, they're a second half team because as of recording, this was right after the Fort Lauderdale match. All Ford Madison's goals have been scored in the second half. They have not scored a goal in the first half. They've been trailing in 3 of those matches, and they've either come back and drew or won the game. So this team just has more of an attacking quality that at least gives you the idea of they were capable of scoring whenever. Unlike, you know, the previous 2 years, once you got to the 60th minute and they weren't scoring, you kind of felt like they're not going to score. Now it's like, how many more are they going to score later in the match? So I think it's going to be interesting how if the team, whoever gets an early lead, if Richmond gets an early lead, it's like, okay, you can't count on Ford Madison. But if Ford Madison gets their early goal, Richmond, and there is a blueprint to scoring at Ford Madison, Richmond is the type of team that can take advantage of it.
Yeah, no, it's going to be very interesting to see. I mean, when it comes to Richmond, like, you never know what you're going to get. We're a very defensive, solid team, but offensively, it's like a bag of chips. You never know what you're going to get with us. And for Madison, man, like, I would say the attacking quality is a lot better, but it's like defensively, you never know what you're going to get. So it's like,
yeah,
wherever team strength is, that's also their weakness in the other team. So it's going to be interesting to watch.
and this is where I feel like, and this is and this will be the first match that Breeze Stevens Field will be at full capacity. So how that translates might be a deciding factor for if Madison gets a win or if they can if they can make up a deficit because of that full capacity. That could be a difference that they didn't have last year. And obviously because the game was at Richmond last year, they didn't have the chance of fancy to travel. I don't know how, that could be a difference as well. Just a full capacity stadium too.
So I want to ask you this question because I don't think anyone else, if I ask them this question, they will understand it as best as me and you would because we're both creators of this. Do you almost feel as if sometimes we were looked at as like, I don't want to say pawns, but like we were being used by USL League One, or like we were doing this for like the benefits of ourselves?
I feel like last year, it was almost a media tour of the Henny Derby. It was kind of like Super Bowl media week, where it's like we each did something on our own respective podcast. And then we're talking to Ryan Madden at USL League One. And then there's others that are kind of like getting input on it as well. It kind of felt like it was just a big media week, like Super Bowl media week almost. And this year, I wonder how much of that is going to change. There are times where, yeah, it kind of feels like not necessarily feeling like a pawn, but like definitely tokenized to an extent. But it's also one of those where I do want to make sure that if there's going to be talk about the Henny Derby, I want to make sure that I'm either involved in it, doing it myself, making sure that the people that are going to speak on it are people I trust. Like if April or Chris wanted to talk about the Henny Derby, I would be totally fine with them doing it because they understand it, they get it. It's just, I definitely don't want it to, be co-opted by someone that I don't fully trust to properly give it the credit, give it the narrative, give it the impact that it does.
Yeah, I think that's something that I was struggling with last year. And I mean, I'm not afraid to say it. I'm talking to you about it. I've dealt with my own little mini spells of depression and stuff like that. So, like, in those moments, I was just like, well, am I doing this for the right reasons? Like, I know I'm doing it for the right reasons, but is it coming across as I'm doing the right reason, or am I making it about myself? And that's something that I never want it to be known of. As if I'm dealing with this. I'm making this all about me. Um, and to be honest with you, even though we're the co-creators of the Henny Derby, I think if it's not of the help of like Grego at For the Culture or 2 Cents FC or the Banner Pub, like helping us and almost embracing it in the same way. Because you're right, it does have that the Super Bowl media feel of where almost each podcast has kind of taken a side of who they're supporting in this.
There's definitely some that lean or are leaning towards one club or the other. There's some people out there.
Yeah, come next week, we're really going to see like who's on what side. But yeah, man, it was something that I was struggling with, and then I think I talked to you about it, and you were just kind of feeling the same way, and we just both came to the consensus of like, if we know in our hearts we're doing this for the right reasons, and if we know that we're doing this for the betterment of our communities, but also like trying to spread awareness and get more black people into the game. Because to be honest with you, like there is no blueprint on how to get black people into the game. If that was the case, a lot of these clubs would be doing it and probably still be failing. But we kind of thought about this. This was our own app. So yeah.
And I think for me, it's kind of like I want to make sure that after myself, Chris, April, we decide to step back more in terms of doing more, kind of like more take a step back and let another, group or generation of black supporters for Forward Madison, like if they can take over and embrace Henny Derby and they then kind of like take the baton from us. Like that's what I would want for the Henny Derby is that so that way when I decide to step back, I don't have to be the one that constantly talks about it. There should be, another supporter that maybe got into Forward Madison or even got into soccer because I went to this Henny Derby. Like that's kind of what I want from it in the future. Like I want to be able so that, it continues as long as both teams are in the league, as long as both teams are playing each other, it can be 5-10 years down the road. And there's another, wave of black supporters that kind of take that handle and kind of promote it as well. So that way, like I said, when I step away, someone else is ready to embrace it just as much as I did and just as much as April did and just as much as Chris did.
And I think both fan bases and supporters who have embraced the Derby within always like, it's weird because in Richard Kickers games, I will have, Red Army members coming to me, and that's the only thing they want to talk about. Like, we want forward. We want to knock forward wrong. We want to be forward. We want to be forward. It is weird because it's almost as if, like, as describing to people, it's not like this Derby is rooted in hate. So, like, y'all in Madison, like, there's clear beef there. us and forward is more of, like, a brotherly rivalry. Like, you want to knock your brother off.
Yeah. It's kind of like you want to beat them. Like, it's fine. Like, when it's aside, like, if Richmond isn't playing, if Richmond's playing someone else, I want Richmond to do well. It's kind of like, I want you to do well, but when it comes to facing you, I want to win. Kind of like that brother. Yeah, it's like either a brotherly kind of love thing or like a two good friends kind of thing where it's like, I want you to do well outside of, these 90 minutes. These 90 minutes, I got to win. Outside of that, we're good.
Yeah, definitely. So I think that's about covering, man, the history of the Henny Derby. We're going into year 3 of this thing.
And there are 4 of them this year. So in case you kind of realize, I missed the first match, there's going to be 3 more. Don't worry. You will have a chance to watch a Henny Derby in 2021.
Yeah, for those listening in 2025, this podcast is kind of weird for you.
Which, thank you for still listening in 2025, but...
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, man, Kyle, I just want to say the best thing about this Derby is that I made a great friend of you, and yeah, that's the history of the Henny Derby.
Yeah, I feel like we probably would not be as close of friends if it wasn't for this Henny Derby. Like, if we had just, both supported our respective teams, we would have known of each other. We would have talked, but I don't think it would have gotten to where we are at now if it wasn't for, having this rivalry, having this bet, which I always laugh. Like, this whole thing started on Twitter, which seems the most 21st century kind of thing. Yes, we started a rivalry because of a bet of Hennessy on Twitter.
About as black as it gets. About as black as you get. Well, with that being said, listeners, we want to say thank you for listening. As always, if you're interested in supporting the podcast, you can do so in the link down below. For Kyle, this is Elliot. We will holler at you guys later on the next episode of Can I Kick It?